My guest today on Creative Inspired Happy is Mike Sowden, the author behind the hugely popular Substack, Everything is Amazing. He is also a former archaeologist and travel writer, and one of the humblest writers I know. Don't be fooled when he starts out the interview by telling you he has no idea what he's doing. Today we talk about what is Substack, and is it too late to get started there? How Mike found his writing voice, a unique blend of scientific explanation and approachable humor. The joy of trying things even when you're not an expert on the topic. Growth on Substack, what works and what doesn't. The concept of writing seasons, a.k.a. finding a publishing cadence that doesn't kill you. What we can learn from Liz Gilbert's multimedia approach to writing, and so much more. Creative Inspired Happy is a video podcast featuring interviews with the biggest names in books, as well as rising literary stars, about what made them fall in love with stories, why they write, their biggest successes and disappointments, and of course, their latest books. All hosted by me, New York Times bestselling author Evelyn Skye. Join our warm community for free to get behind-the-scenes insights about author life, book recommendations, the opportunity to ask questions of upcoming podcast guests, and more. Just go to creativeinspiredhappy.com or follow the link in the episode notes. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, Mike, welcome to Creative Inspired Happy. I'm thrilled to have you on the show because your Substack, Everything is Amazing, is one of my favorite reads. How are you doing today?
Well, my day just got so much better, you saying that. Thank you. I'm very well, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, so this is an honor.
Thank you. No, this is, I think we're going to have so much fun. So I want to start out for our viewers and listeners who don't know what Substack is. Could you give us kind of a primer? I know Substack has been in the news a little bit more recently, but what is Substack?
Oh, well, Substack is, it's in the news for being a newsletter platform, but what it also is a newsletter and blogging platform. So my background is 10 years ago, I was travel blogging. And what I love about Substack is that there's a web version of everything that you publish as a newsletter. So that is wonderful for marketing, for sending people towards your stuff, because you get to do all the things bloggers were doing 10 years ago. So you can have an article and people can discover it through Google and go and read your thing and then discover it's a newsletter. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, I love it. And also they have so many tools that you can use if you want to, but you don't have to. So for example, I run my podcast off of Substack. Substack is now my home base for everything. And we have the audio version of this conversation we're having that's going to Apple and to Spotify and Audible. I've got a video version that's on Substack. But what I really love is that it's kind of tailor-made however you want to use it. And so if you don't want to do video, you don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, Substack is this vast Swiss Army knife. It sounds like you're using all these different tools that I don't even know. I'm like somebody with an actual Swiss Army knife going, oh, wow, there's a corkscrew. And that's kind of how I am. I use it in a fairly basic way.
Okay, because I think you're British and therefore you're just innately humble. You talk about using Substack in such a basic way, and yet you identified Substack as a place to be long before I did. I've only been here for about a year and a half now, and you were here from early on. You're extraordinarily successful here. How many subscribers are you at now?
I'm not, you're right, I am British, so I can't take any compliments whatsoever, but I'm currently on, I've just passed 31,000 subscribers, and I'm on around over 800 paid, I'll say.
So I want to talk about growth a little bit later, but first, let's tell people about your Substack. Everything is Amazing. Like I said, one of my favorite reads online right now. And yeah, what is it? How'd you get started?
Oh, well, my newsletter, the kind of science writing I've always loved, including when I was a travel writer, and before that I was an archaeologist. The kind of science writing I really loved just had this boundless enthusiasm for what the topic was. So I really got into what I write about, which is science writing, but it's kind of a science student newsletter because I'm a student of everything that I write about. I'm not writing about things that I really have any expertise in whatsoever, and that is why I enjoy it so much. I'm learning as much as my readers are learning, and I started it because I started it because in 2020, travel writing went away for a number of years. And I had taken some time out. At that point, I'd not been writing for about 3 or 4 years because of um, my late mum passed away, and then I sold the house, and I was feeling very burnt out about all of that. And I needed to basically have a rest and then discover if I could come back and have another go at being a writer. And I thought that was going to be via travel writing, but then clearly it wasn't. So I started thinking about what other kinds of writing do I enjoy and what would I like to learn about? And I just got into science writing. And along the way, I really discovered the power of kind of getting over your imposter syndrome and presenting yourself as a student. Now, the thing about my newsletter is I now am read by a lot of people who know a lot more about the topics I write about than I do. And that is a wonderful thing, because sometimes I am going to get things wrong because I am a student and students do get things wrong. And that should be seen as a superpower when you're writing a newsletter, because, there's I don't know who said it, but there was a fun thing. If you want to learn the correct way to do something, then you should go onto social media and write about the wrong way to do something. And it's like, and people will leap into the comments and teach you stuff. And hopefully, a few of them, obviously some folk will be chaotic and give you all sorts of rubbish. But along the way, the comments are where you discover the truth of what you're writing about. And I've really found that the more I write my way into a topic, I do stumble over some basic errors that I make, because especially with maths, oh good grief. But most commenters are generous and they want to, especially I think in science, the people who leave comments about science are really, really interested in science, and they love the ideas, and they really want to, they don't want to score points against you or take you down. They basically want to correct you in a good way.
What I love about this is I think that a lot of people are too afraid to try something if they're not already an expert. And you recognize that you're not an expert. Instead, you're leading with curiosity. And it sounds like for you, part of the joy is just trying. It's saying, hey, I want to know about this subject. And like your newsletter is called, everything is amazing. I love this sense of wonder that you approach the world with, where you see something interesting and you think, I want to learn more about that. And it's some people would call it brave, but I also think it's just fun. It's just fun to dive in and say, gosh, what if I knew more about this? And then to make it a community discussion, basically, as you're saying, with the commenters who are saying, hey, actually, maybe you got this wrong. And then I see how engaged you are with the comments, and you're excited to learn more. So one of the things that I love the most about your newsletter as well is your voice, because I think it conveys that curiosity, that wonder with the world. You do such a great balance of teaching us about things. And I know you say you're a student, but I learned so much from every one of your newsletters. But you're also so funny. Like you infuse your newsletters with humor, and it's part self-deprecating humor, and it's part just little asides. How did you find your voice?
I think that side of my voice has definitely come from my travel writing. So the way I think about my journey to date is that being an archaeologist taught me to think, and travel writing taught me to write. And one of the things that works very well in travel writing is self-deprecation. So you do learn that if you're going to put yourself into a story, and to really light that story up, you can just have a lot of fun at your own expense, and invite the readers to laugh at you. And that's a really fun thing. That's as close as I get to memoir. If I write about myself, it's usually in a somewhat mocking way, because it's fun to kind of just paint yourself as inherently absurd, and it also ties in with the whole presenting yourself as a student. So this is where I think it helps with imposter syndrome, because if first of all you don't take yourself too seriously, and secondly you present yourself as somebody who's just learning in public, then those two things really help, because they take the pressure off. All of a sudden it's like, okay, well I can get things wrong and I can look an idiot publicly, and it's definitely not the end of the world. In fact, it may even help me. So I learned that voice from reading people like Bill Bryson. For a while, I just wanted to be Bill Bryson because he had he has this wonderful self-mocking way. He's not afraid of taking the mick out of himself in order to make the story better and in order to make a point. And in presenting himself as incompetent in so many ways, he gets to talk about these topics in a really fun and engaging way. And Bill Bryson is not incompetent. That's the thing that I love about him. He was a journalist working in Fleet Street in London for a number of years. He really knows how to put a story together. But along the way, he learned that the way that you put stories together in newspapers, there's a way of doing it that can be quite dull. So you can see him constantly experimenting with, like, oh, I'm going to set an expectation because you read this in the newspapers all the time, and then I'm going to completely subvert it with something ridiculous at the end. So I learned that style from Bill Bryson and other writers, and trouble writing, and also just pitching stories that didn't get anywhere. And then I realized, oh, it's because I wasn't having fun, and the fun doesn't come across. But also, if I can find something that makes me go, wow, my newsletter is just peddling wows all the time. And that's what I do on social media as well. And that's what works. If I can make somebody go, wow, then I've got them. That's the point where they stop and they lean in. And they lean in exactly the same way that humor makes you lean in. It's like, it's a wonderful pattern interrupter. There's so much about information now where we just feel utterly bombarded by so much of it, that we're just in this kind of, we're kind of tuned out state because there's just so much.
You mentioned social media. You mentioned that we're overstimulated with information. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of newsletters. And because Substack has gotten more, high profile, because it's so easy to start a Substack, there's so many newsletters and there's a lot of fatigue, I think, with subscription. So I would love to talk a little bit about how you have managed to continue to grow your Substack, because yes, you were here in the early days. And so you got more subscribers because there wasn't as much competition. And yet recently you've had a lot of success, including on social media, which people like to say doesn't work. There are a lot of quote unquote experts out there who are trying to make a living on Substack by teaching people how to grow their Substack, but you are actually living proof that these techniques work. I'm curious, are you going into it like thinking that you're trying to grow, or are you going into it with the same approach as you write your newsletter of, I'm just going to be me and certain things hit?
A bit of both. And I always feel like it's a bit of a cop-out when somebody says bit of both. But I am always thinking about those two things. I'm thinking about how can I be on social media and have my voice the same as that is in the newsletter? So if somebody does click through and start reading me, there isn't that jarring total change. But also in using social media, I am using it to grow, and I'm very aware of that. So my method that I use the most, in fact, probably the method I use full stop, is to tell a story that is something from my newsletter in usually about 10 tweets in a thread. When I say tweets, I mean, it used to be on Twitter. I don't use Twitter anymore, but that's where I started kind of, learning about this technique from others who are doing it very well. And I started experimenting with it myself, but I'm also now doing it on Threads and Blue Sky. And both of them, since they are essentially building on the example of Twitter, they have the same kind of profile. The thing that I have learned along the way is that if you are doing a thread, you need to be aware of where the thread will be cut off by the platform. So if people will click on the first post of a thread, at some point, platform dependent, they'll be able to scroll through all your following up tweets, and then there'll be a click to see more button at the bottom, and that's kind of the cutoff point for people's attention span, and only the really committed ones will click to see more. So if you want to kind of get your thread within whatever that number is. I think on Threads it's about 10. I think on Blue Sky it's something like 13. On Twitter it used to be 20, I think it was. So I work within that, and I also on social media I try to do a slightly more gonzo version of what I'm doing, because it's a more condensed version, so I can use humor a bit more, and I can have a bit more fun. But it all really started. I knew that when I started my newsletter, I had two problems to solve. What am I writing, and how am I going to write it? And how do I do my marketing? And I have no marketing background. Even as a travel blogger, I really didn't know what I was doing with marketing. I just did the classic old, hi, I wrote a thing, click on my link, it's really good. Hi, everyone, that kind of stuff. I did so much of that, and nothing worked. And so this time around, I just thought, right, I'm gonna do something completely different. And I started paying attention to writers that were doing these kinds of threads, usually science writers. And I loved the approach. It was fun. It was fun to tell a story in that way. And it's fun to do it as well in real time. Because what I find now is when I start a thread on Blue Sky social media, I'll do the first couple, and then I'll start getting replies already. And they'll be like saying, come on, where's the rest of it? Hurry up, write faster. And that's when you've really got something going. But that's my number one marketing technique. And I was worried, because when Twitter changed, Twitter started throttling links to Substack. This is, I don't know, 2022, late 2022, I think it was. And it was looking like, okay, well, that technique is no longer going to work for me, and I've missed the boat there. I got out of it what I wanted to get. I had a thread that went viral and gave me about 6,000 free subscribers in a week. And that was, and I was thinking, okay, well, I did this thing and it worked, and I was very lucky, but also it did its job for me. And now if it's never going to work again anywhere else, that's fine. That's fine. I can go and find something else that works. But I'm just glad that now I've discovered, particularly in the last week, I had a thread take off both on Threads and Blue Sky, and that proved to me that telling these stories and using these threads in this kind of way can do exactly what it did for me before. So I got a lot of free subscribers and some paid subscribers just from that thread, directly from social media. So I was like, okay, this does work. I don't have to go away and discover, I don't have to go and reinvent the wheel yet again for myself and learn something new that possibly everyone else already knows, but I don't.
Are you doing the same posts on Blue Sky and Threads, or are the platforms slightly different and the audience is slightly different?
They are slightly different. I'm the main limitation with Blue Sky is the character length. So on Threads, you have a lot more words to play with. On Blue Sky, I have to do a shrunken down version. I think on Blue Sky as well, there's a lot more scientists. So I was kind of a little more nervous about putting something on Blue Sky, because I think that's where I would have something. If I did something that was just appallingly wrong and an absolute clunker, that is where I would get called out. But the wonderful thing that I discovered last week, I had a story go viral, and it's a story of back in 2023, there was a mysterious seismic pulse that was heard in all corners of the globe. It was all over the place, and it was almost like a metronome, and at one beat every 90 seconds, and nobody could understand what this was. And it turned out that it was water sloshing around in a fjord after a landslide in Greenland, and it formed a standing wave where it was hardly losing energy. So basically the water was sloshing back and forward, and it was, every time it hit the sides of this fjord, it created this seismic pulse that went through the earth, because water is incredibly heavy. This is one of the wonderful things that I've been learning in my latest season. And so scientists had this wonderful collaborative effort all over the world. So many scientists, so many departments working on this problem. And then they discovered what it was, and then there was a paper published a year later, and the mystery was solved. So it's some detective work, but it was truly international detective work. And on Blue Sky, I actually had the lead author of the paper sharing my thread, which is really cool. And then that's an opportunity for me to say, well, thank you, because I couldn't have, obviously I didn't do any work here. All I did was write this up. And that's really what I feel I can be doing. I can be a useful idiot to the people who are doing the actual work. So
Okay, how do you get your ideas? Because I know that you are a voracious reader. Before we started recording, you told me that you read something like 10 books or, articles and things at a time.
yeah.
How do you find out all these how do you find these interesting ideas?
Oh, it's such a messy process, but I think that's part of it. The amount of things, the amount of essentially tabs that I've got open in my life is probably ludicrous, and I could probably do a better job of narrowing it down a bit. I'm a bit like that. I think there was a story that went viral. There was somebody who had, I think it was in Firefox browser. They had something like 1,300 tabs open in their browser, and I feel like that's not far off. Obviously, not that bad. That's not far off me with books, podcasts, audiobooks, articles, magazines. I think one of the jobs of somebody who is writing a science newsletter is to be interested in everything, because science is interested in everything. Scientists are inherently very curious people, I would say. The ones I know are just interested in everything. You get talking about something they know nothing about. They will ask you questions in a really kind of piercing way. And that's really fun. And they're doing that not because they have an intention behind it, but because they're just interested. And so I'm very much interested right now in the process of doing things to discover the point of why you started doing them. So the thing that it's very easy in today's world to only focus on the things where you've quantified the value of doing a thing in advance. And what that does is it fails to appreciate the role of serendipity and chance and discovering something really fun along the way. And so I try to approach curiosity in that way. So I'm always like thinking, oh yeah, but is this okay? Maybe there's no point to doing this, but is it fun, or is it going to do something that I've never done before, and is it going to introduce me to a bunch of people I've never talked to before? Well, then maybe I should put some time aside to do it, and I should not feel constrained by not having a logical, rational reason for doing this. So my writing is pretty much informed by that kind of approach to everything I take in, and my reading is as well.
So I'm actually curious about how you write in seasons in your newsletter. And
Mm.
it seems almost contradictory to what you just said in terms of it should be a constraint. Talk a little bit about seasons and how you organize your Substack and why you use this as a structure.
It is a little contradictory, because every season I am picking a theme, but I'm not picking a theme and saying to myself, okay, I'm going to cover this theme all the way from A to Z. So really, by picking a theme, it's almost like you're picking a suitcase to go on holiday with. And
So like just sorry to interrupt, but like so for example, for people who don't know about your seasons,
oh
right
yeah,
now your theme is water.
yes, it's yes, water and the atmospheric sciences. So I'm really kind of looking at any topic that really interests me at the moment that is related to the atmospheric sciences. I will do some reading into and see if I can discover something that makes me go wow and want to write about it. And at the same time, I'm also trying to do a very basic, very loose primer into how we study the atmospheric scientists. Scientists. So I first looked at the early balloonists who discovered the layers of the atmosphere and the crazy danger they put themselves into, and all the strange things that we don't know about our atmosphere. One of the most wonderfully ghoulish things is if you were in a balloon and that balloon just kept on taking you upwards. Um, we think that the thing that you should be worried about is the oxygen. So you have your breathing apparatus, but beyond a certain point, there's a certain height where basically there's not enough air pressure anymore to keep the moisture in your body from boiling away. So basically, at that point, all the moisture in your body, including in your eyes, in your nostrils, everything will just evaporate, and it'll be very unpleasant. And this is a thing that there was an astronaut who was in an accident where he was very, very briefly exposed to vacuum, and he felt the moisture on his tongue boiling, and that's like and that makes me go wow. So as soon as I was reading about that, okay, I can write about that, because that's a thing I didn't know. That's going to make people go wow, and also it's slightly horrifying, and that's another version of wow as well.
Right. But whenever things are horrifying, you don't do it in a way that freaks me out. Actually, it makes me just so curious. Like that story about balloonists, you had a story earlier this year, and it was about a hot air balloon and they lost control. And that was fascinating. I was riveted. And so, your seasons, how long is a season? And did you come up with this idea to keep yourself somewhat sane in a publishing cadence?
Yeah, a season ideally should be around 6 months, most. I would love to be doing seasons at 3 to 4 months, but I started doing it at the beginning. But what I've been finding is there's just so much I'm interested in now, so much I want to write about, and also I don't want to be solely exclusively writing about the topic in every season. So I want to have the freedom to write about other things and go back and revisit things as I learn something new about previous seasons' topics. So, so how long is a season is kind of how long is a piece of string, kind of question for me at the moment. It's really the last season took me 11 months, and the reason I wanted to write in seasons in that way was it helps with my marketing as well, so that I am constantly refreshing my newsletter. I'm aiming at a slightly different audience. And so I'm having other people coming in who are interested maybe in this topic where they weren't interested in the last one. And it allows me to work with beginnings and endings. Now, as a fiction writer, you know how important that is. It's getting people excited. It's getting people looking forward to what's coming next. It's, then you can start working with all the tools of a fiction writer within your nonfiction, like foreshadowing and so on. And it also allows me to do paid subscriber drives at the end of each season in a kind of an NPR, kind of way. And that's been great for growth as well. So I knew I needed something in there that was an excuse to ask people for money. And this is one of the hard things about running a paid newsletter. You need to be playing with something of a, you need to have something of a formula, but you constantly need to be breaking that formula in order to keep the surprise levels up. So, this with your work, we are playing with these two things. We set an expectation and confound it constantly. And we have to do both things at the same time, which is really hard. And nobody's teaching that really. Nobody teaches you how to. In fact, there's so much that is about setting a formula that doesn't talk about the fact that as soon as you've set a formula, the clock is ticking because your audience is now getting used to it. And when audiences get used to something too much, then they start to tune out. So, yeah.
And I think there's also boredom for the writer themselves too.
Exactly.
Once you set a formula and you think, oh, great, I've got this rhythm. At some point you think, I would really like to do something else.
Yeah, and you evolve as a writer. You the way that you approach things evolves, and I really don't think we allow ourselves enough freedom as newsletter writers to really kind of lean into what we're feeling like we want to be doing. It's so easy to burn out on, my audience expects this from me, so now I need to stick to this thing forever. And it's, that's also not what you see other people outside of newsletter writing who are messing around with these formats with great success. When Liz Gilbert released Big Magic, she released a podcast series called Magic Lessons, and it was 10 episodes, and it was a really interesting format as well. It was, in the first one, she would talk to one of her readers, just a member of the public, I guess you would say, and it would be about a creative problem that that person was having, and Liz would try to give her best advice. And then at the end of that episode, she would say, you know who I think would be a really good person to answer this? I think it'd be Brené Brown would give you a really good. So I'll talk to Brené Brown about this in the next episode. And that'd be a two. So, and then she'd do so. And that two episode format repeated, I think 5 times. I think it was 10 episodes for the first season. And that was it. And then she stopped. And that was like, and I think she ended up doing a second series. But when she first did it, that was like, do it, beginning, ending, and you're out.
So speaking of shifting gears, doing different things, you have on your plate a couple of books that you're working on. One's nonfiction, one is fiction. Talk to me a little bit about how you think your past experience as a travel writer and now writing the science newsletter will be parlayed into writing a longer form fiction, nonfiction, but which does have a beginning and an end.
Yeah. Ooh. Well, both of these books are in the earliest of early stages. They're not even at the alpha stage at the moment. Well, I guess one is I'm discussing that with my partner, who's a doctor. We have an idea around a way that essentially she also has a Substack, and the way that we would write our way into this would be very much leaning on both of our interests. So that feels like a fun book project. But the second one, I don't know yet. Probably the smart move would be to do something that is very much kind of the style of Everything is Amazing. So it'd be a nonfiction science book with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of, clueless wonder. I probably should do that, but also there's part of me that does want to write fiction. So I started as a fiction reader. I've always loved fiction. I've always loved just the reading a really, really powerful work of fiction that really reaches down into you. It's like listening to a language that you'd never heard spoken before, but you can instantly understand. It speaks to you in just, I've not had anything in any of my nonfiction writing experiences that has reached into me quite as deeply as my favorite fiction books have. So I would love to have a go at that experience and to discover what kind of fiction writer I could be. I don't even know if I'd be a good one. It could be that I'll be one of these people who is a good nonfiction writer and is pretty appalling as a fiction writer. But I have enough ego to think that I can have a go at that. But I also want to go on that journey. I want to enjoy the challenge of having a go at that kind of writing as well, and having a go at the world building and discovering what I really want to say in my fiction, and to discover what genre that's going to be in. I suspect it'll probably be science fiction, but who knows?
Well, I think that fits in with the rest of your personality, just the let's go and try and let's see where it goes. And there's that, again, you approach writing with such humility that I think it allows you to explore these different paths that other people might be too afraid to start because you don't expect yourself to be an expert already when you're just beginning.
That's nice of you to say. I also feel like fiction is an opportunity to experiment in a different way as well. So probably the most famous example at this point is Andy Weir with The Martian. So he wrote The Martian as a series of blog posts, and by the end of writing this in his personal blog, his audience was yelling at him to publish it as a book so that they could read the whole thing. And he was just, they were basically saying, "Can you please stop publishing these every week? We want this as a book. Please let us buy the book. We will pay anything." And so he did that, and it was bestseller, and he got a publishing deal out of it. And I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I love the idea of coming up with an experiment that could maybe work in that way. So it's another opportunity to play around with the format, with the kind of the joy of being a bit rebellious with this strange career that we have.
Well, I'm so looking forward to where you go with your writing and what happens next. But for anyone who wants to make sure they infuse their life with that sense of wow and wonder, I hope that they'll check out Everything is Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show, Mike. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. This was just as much as a pleasure I thought it would be. Thank you. Thank you for what you do as well.
Want more writing advice and career insight? Join thousands for free at creativeinspiredhappy.com to go behind the scenes with best-selling authors and get access to our book club for writers, creativity challenges, and more. I can't wait to see you there.